to Pop Shield, a long-form discussion podcast about musical topics both past and present. I'm Gabe, and I'm joined as always by Dan.
Hello.
And Darren.
Hello.
So it's been about 2 weeks since Kanye West dropped his 9th LP and first Christian rap album, Jesus is King, and it's been a little more than a year since Kanye dominated the entire summer of 2018 with his 5-album Wyoming project. In between was the delayed again, then scrapped, but thankfully mostly leaked Yandhi album, the launch of Kanye's Sunday service, and a full-blown conversion to Christianity. And we're here to discuss it all. Now, I know we're probably eager to get into Jesus is King, and we definitely will, but all of this insanity, especially the Yandhi leaks, gives us the very unique opportunity to walk through the radical transformation of one of our greatest artists step by step. Aside from maybe the Beach Boys' Smile, I can't really think of anything like it, and even then, Brian Wilson didn't end up renouncing surfing. Do you guys know what I mean? Like, this is insane. So let's start the conversation at the beginning. I asked you guys to revisit Ye and Kids See Ghosts, and I'm wondering how you guys think those albums sound a year later.
I sort of have basically the same feelings as I did. You know, I think Ye is good. It's a sort of like for the fans only kind of record, but I enjoy it. I think Kids See Ghost is much better. They both like are a little too short and everything. But you know, the whole thing, you know, Wyoming thing he was doing with the 7 tracks. So, you know, I'll allow it. But I basically have the same sort of feelings I had a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think I pretty much agree. Like when both of those came out, I just, you know, wasn't like too excited about them. I mean, obviously we covered them on our older podcast, so there was a period of time where I was listening to it a lot, but pretty much since then, I just haven't even come back to it. And I've had, you know, a couple of Kanye, you know, trips that I've been really listening to other Kanye albums, and I just never even bothered to revisit either of those.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. And, you know, I think it's easy to forget now, which we'll get to, how kind of shocking these 2 albums were, because yeah, the whole Wyoming project thing was really fun and exciting, but the albums we got, especially Ye, was just so, you know, it just felt rushed, incomplete, sloppy, which was just something that Kanye had never done before. And you could say Pablo was sloppy, but it was like, that was part of the point, you know, and it just worked wonderfully. So this was like the first, you know, real kind of L in one of the biggest, longest winning streaks in musical history, I think. And so, you know, coming back to it, I was really surprised to find that in contrast with Jesus is King, it sounds quite polished. You know what I mean? It sounds like actually a lot more labored over, which we'll get to. But I still find that they just don't really do it for me. You know, we talked about on our previous podcast how Ye, it like tries to do this little redemption arc, but it's just so short that it really falls flat. And Kids See Ghosts has its, you know, major defenders. You know, Anthony Fantano gave it a perfect 10, for example, but that I think I was quite into, but I feel like you, Darren, where it's like, I just never really feel the urge to come back to it. So, you know, that tells me something. Now, we are, you know, as we continue to walk through this crazy year in the life of Kanye, we went ahead and dived into the Yandhi leaks, okay? As everybody probably knows, Yandhi was announced to be released on September 29th, then delayed till November 23rd, then delayed indefinitely. Many songs started leaking, I think, earlier this year, most in the summer, little bit-by-bit things. And what we did was we sort of reconstructed, or other people have done this, but pieced together our own version of Yandhi. The track list we're going by is, you know, he posted like this picture of a whiteboard. Do you guys remember this? With like the Yandhi track list. And, you know, we gotta recognize that stuff would have changed. You know, it always does when he posts these little whiteboard pics. But the track list we're going by is Storm, New Body, Bye Bye Baby, I Love It, Hurricane, Aliens / SpaceX, Last Name, City in the Sky / Garden, We Got Love, and Chakras. A couple other things leaked. There's like a version of Selah where he's cussing, you know, it's kind of crazy. But again, a lot of this stuff would have changed. But I wonder if we can sort of describe, you know, Yandhi would have come out just a couple months after the Wyoming project. So what did it look like what do we have here, and what did it look like it could have been?
Yeah, I think you should clarify that when you say the release date was September 29th and then November 23rd, you mean last year, 2018, not this year. But yeah, as far as the record, it's something that I think like sort of went back to closer to Yeezus style, and I'm sure people, if you're listening to this, I'm sure you saw what his album cover for Yandhi was. It was like a mini disc that like basically looked like Yandhi, but it was purple instead of red. So it like sort of seemed like not a regression, like going back doing the same old thing, but almost like if Pablo didn't exist, it was sort of like what the next step would have logically may have been from Yeezus.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a little more in line with Pablo for me. Like almost immediately, the first few tracks kind of brought me past like Yay. Like I didn't even like feel like there was a connection there. I felt like this was like some sort of follow up to Pablo with even some ideas that coming out of the Pablo sessions almost. Existing, like, especially like I Love It. I know that ended up being a single and going off on its own, I guess, but like, I feel like that vibe was very much in line with like what he was doing with Pablo.
Yeah, I do actually agree with you on that one. Yeah, but I agree. It's as if Ye didn't exist. Definitely with these songs, kind of.
I mean, I kind of thought of it as like, in light of Ye, where we don't need to rehash it, but obviously the whole Trump thing, the slavery being a choice thing, Kanye took like more heat than he ever has in his entire career. And it seemed like Yandhi was almost intended to be like a giant fuck you. And a proud defiance against people who would try to cancel Kanye, and in that respect, I can understand why he's kind of like evoking the Yeezus era, because Yeezus was like, fuck you to everything, like all at once. It was just pure rage. And so it seems like maybe he was trying to tap back into that or something like that. And, when you listen to a track like I Love It or New Body, these are some of like the raunchiest things he's done, right?
Right.
And they are just like I like it is a dumb song, but it's just proud about its stupidity. It's like, that's all this is. It's disgusting. It's raunchy. Like, let's do this. And there was a little bit of that on Pablo, with like the bleached assholes lines and stuff like that. And it just felt like, and periodically throughout, and we should mention that like the lyrics are sometimes kind of finished, often him just kind of like laying down scratch vocals where he's obviously trying little ideas, mumbling, sometimes just shouting Grand Theft Auto over and over again for some reason. But sometimes he's mentioning stuff like, about I chose not to be a slave, and all that stuff, and just sort of like doubling down on the stuff that got him in trouble in the first place. So I find that quite interesting, in that it was almost like, because how he cut that line from I Thought About Killing You on Ye about sorry, but I chose not to be a slave. It felt like he might have been held back a little bit, maybe by Kim or some other pressure, not to really dive into it. And everybody was really disappointed, you remember, by the way that Ye didn't really address the stuff he had gotten in trouble with.
Yeah, for all we know, it might have been a last minute change. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that line was certainly cut at the last minute, but it's like here he was like, you know what? I didn't get to speak my piece. People trying to hold me back. I'm going to say the shit I want to say, and I'm going to be like disgusting and crazy. And at the same time, though, we get some like very tender tracks on here. I mean, don't you guys agree that like Last Name could have been like a top 10 Kanye song?
Oh yeah, I mean that song is really great.
Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of classic Kanye.
Yeah, I mean I agree, and I think I'm kind of following where you're going with this, Gabe, in terms of like, him addressing things like the slavery thing, and probably I think that's where the album probably would have started to really take shape. But I don't think he was really too close to that. You know what I mean? Because like a song like Last Name, I don't know, it doesn't really, it kind of clashes with that, with that line of like, didn't want to, or I didn't choose to be a slave, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I think this song could have either got cut or, you know how.
But he's sort of saying like, I'm giving up my slave name.
Yeah.
And there's like something there. And, there, how he's fond of these like redemption arcs. We were just talking about how Ye tries to pull it off the same like dark fantasy level redemption arc, but doesn't have the time to get there. Mm-hmm. This feels obviously incomplete, but it feels like it's trying to do a similar thing, because right around the track Hurricane, we switch from songs that are weirdly obsessed with like plastic surgery and like fake bitches and, shit like that. He seems to not like Instagram and like this sort of selfie culture and stuff, which is weird because he's married to Kim Kardashian. Maybe that's part of the reason he scrapped it. But around Hurricane, it sort of switches into this like sort of beautiful, a lot of like tender flute sounds and like light synth sounds, a lot of singing toward the end. Last Name is very beautiful. We Got Love is like, he was always tweeting at that time about love and love everyone and stuff like that. And
I forgot about that.
You know what I mean? It seems like the album was intended to kind of defy his haters or his cancelers, and then sort of emerge on the other side with some sort of transcendent escape from all that. You know what I'm saying? You can kind of see it.
Don't you feel like that's sort of been Kanye's path since like dark fantasy though, to sort of like deny his haters and stuff?
Well, I mean, the difference is that when it comes to like, dark fantasy, he's sort of like, it's almost like he's aware of like what a monster he is. You know what I mean? But it's like he's like the power is going to his head. That's kind of like what that song is about and how reckless he's being. He's not like fuck yeah, I was drinking earlier and now I'm driving. You can't tell me what to do. He's kind of like admitting I'm out of control. You know what I mean? Whereas this has a little bit more of that, like there's none of that, I'm not going to apologize for shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like this is more like hedonistic than Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy or anything. It's just weird that like he got so far with all these songs. I mean, so much so that I Love It got released as a single. He played it on SNL. He also played We Got Love on SNL, which I think that leak is at least partially from that.
Yeah.
It sounds
this is really fun. Yeah, so like the We Got Love that I found. Seems to be stitched together from the SNL performance with, I don't know, different components that leaked or an incomplete song. Maybe Kanye wasn't on the original thing that leaked. I don't know. But this is very like Beach Boys Smile. And it's very cool that this exists almost, because fans are like piecing shit together and like creating full songs. Hurricane, I don't think is even like supposed to be as long as the one I have it. But somebody I think has sort of pieced together like, it might be Kanye even just singing a scratch vocal toward the end, but you know what I'm saying? It's like kind of a fun puzzle that fans are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I on one hand, I wish like the album got finished and we got the polished version of this, because a lot of these songs are really great. But then again, it is kind of cool that this is sort of like hip hop's Smile almost.
Yeah,
and I could say I was wondering like. We've talked about like last episode, we talked about like some albums that we didn't really even think about that much, like MBV and stuff, because it's not on streaming. So I was wondering, like, will something like this that's a bootleg, like, will it have like staying power and stuff because like you have to go out of your way to get into it and all? What would I mean?
I think that's part of the fun of it, though, right? If Kanye turned around and was just like, yeah, here it is for everybody, the whole fun of like piecing it together and speculating, the whole Smile mythology just like would be gone,
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because it almost feels like, there are going to be a couple times in this podcast where I'm going to like verge into, lunatic Kanye stan, but it almost feels purposeful because it's like Pablo was like the perfect album for the digital age, because it was just like this mess of songs. They're actually being updated, like songs are being added.
Yeah, exactly.
And, it was like the streaming world, like this is how music is going to be. You know, you don't print a CD and it's like that way forever, you know. And now the next logical step of that is an album that's like not even complete and things leak and fans can piece it together.
You know, maybe you remember he's talked about, you know, like in the interview and stuff I told you about, he's working with Teenage Engineering, which is like a synth manufacturer for like, he's just said it's like some device that like allows you to like mess with stems of songs like live, you know, so like, I mean, that was for Jesus is King, but yeah, maybe that is like sort of like an extension of that. And I mean, it is like sort of the next kind of step from like the Pablo kind of existence of him updating it. Now, like you can update it.
Yeah, there's something very interesting about it. And I feel like it's like, it might have some legs, like you were asking, Dan. Like, I think forever, I mean, I know forever, people are going to be like, you know, whenever he announces a new project, like, God damn, I hope that Last Name is on it, you know, or I hope that he finishes Alien, or I hope that, you know, we get City in the Sky. That's another, like, that feels like it could have been an all-time classic. And that's going to live on. And I think every time that happens, there's going to be people like, hey, you know, you can listen to the leak. And there's already kind of a vibrant community. There's like a Yandhi leaks subreddit dedicated to this whole pursuit. I think it might be sort of like a living legend, even though part of me in the back of my mind hopes he does, you know, finish it one day, as doubtful as that is. Any other like kind of highlights or, you know, things that surprised you or stuck out at you listening to Yandhi here?
Well, I think my favorite is Alien SpaceX. Like first off, we get a great Young Thug verse, you know, start us out.
There's some debate whether that belongs there, because, you know, you can't know, you know what I mean? Like,
I'm going to say yes, it does belong there, because if it doesn't belong there, then he was wrong, and it should belong there. Because
it does sound awesome.
That verse is so great. And then even like Kid Cudi's like verse is great.
Very cool.
And then even Kanye, when he's just you know, scratch vocaling, just saying the ozone killing animals.
Yeah.
It's like so ridiculous and funny.
It's like really fun. It's like, you know, because that's another thing. Like, you remember 30 Hours from Pablo did this. It just like gave us this insight. It predicts Yandhi, you know, by just being like, let the beat run, and he's just going to play around on the beat. This is what it sounds like when Kanye is writing a song. It's almost like a bootleg, and a lot of Pablo kind of sounds like a bootleg. And then now we have like the real thing where he's just sort of like playing around. I like when he says something about Alex Jones, and you can hear everybody in the room start laughing.
No, I know that's kind of stuff is great because, like, you know, there's in rock music, you know, you kind of get some of that sometimes. You know, there's songs where you can hear the people laughing, or you know, even just like hearing someone's fingers slide on the guitar or something. But like in hip hop, you know, kind of gets like a sterileness to it, because most of it is like electronic or, you know, not like done live in a room. So like stuff like that is like kind of neat to like, you get a little peek behind the curtain, which is something you don't really get in hip hop all that often.
Yeah, there's something cool. Like I'm almost, again, I hope that he finishes Yandhi for some reason against all odds, but it's cool even then that this leaked in some way to hear these in their like nascent versions. Anything jump out at you, Darren?
I mean, I genuinely, you know, liked most of the tracks. You know what I mean? I did feel like some things just, you know, obviously just weren't completely finished, and that's, you know, obviously to be expected with something like this. And so I'm always kind of torn because pretty much everything after Dark Fantasy, you know, maybe with the exception of Yeezus after I kind of like came back to it, but like, you know, I'm always just wondering, like, why can't he just spend a little more time working on tracks and like finishing them in the way that it seemed like he was doing with Dark Fantasy? You know what I mean? Like Dark Fantasy, he like isolated himself. He had people in and out of the studio. It was like every day in the studio, hours on end. You know what I mean? Like that was a whole entire like different approach to creating an album, and he just has not really done that ever since then. It's always been fairly quick, like, let's do it, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean? And that's worked for him, obviously, but there's obviously cases where it just hasn't worked. And like Yandhi to me sounds like the start of something really great, but I wonder, you know, would he have spent enough time to get it there, or would we be left with, you know, kind of, because like even with Pablo, we talked about this on the previous podcast, like it's a little uneven. Like there's some like amazing moments, and then there's some low points. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Some highlights and lowlights. I think I made that joke last
there it is
podcast.
again.
Every podcast. No, but I think I hear like a level of effort here. And think about it. If Yandhi came out and it was like a great album, then Ye would be like an outlier. It would be the only time in his career that he kind of like rushed something, you know, and we would not think of Kanye as the guy who rushes everything, really.
Right.
So this feels like it really could have been great. It's obviously sort of hard to tell, but it's just like, I don't know. When I listen to like Hurricane or Alien, City in the Sky, you know, there's like instrumentally, it's just incredible. Like the palette and the like musical changes are always like surprising and interesting. You talked about Kid Cudi's section on Alien, and it's like the music just takes like such an unexpected turn and kind of turns into this like really glorious, you know, Kid Cudi, like, what's he saying about something like, I'm hearing you, Lord. And it's like, it becomes like suddenly very emotional when he's been sort of talking about being an alien and stuff. It's surprising. It's exciting. We'll talk about this, but I just think like sonically, it's everything here is more interesting than Jesus is King. But, you know, there are several songs in here that I think really would have been classics. I wanted to highlight XXXTentacion's verse on Storm.
I was just going to say that.
It's just fucking awesome. And actually, every guest here just like seems to bring it, which again, we'll talk about this, is something that I think is missing from Jesus is King. Yeah,
that XXX Tentacion, it's like, I like it because he's going like so hard. It reminds me of what's that Fuck on Me, what's that song? Look at me. Look at me. Yeah. It like reminds me of that, but it's like funny because the quality is so different, you know, like and I'm sure, you know, that's because of the leaks or whatever, but like it just like instantly gets to like, oh, I recorded this on a cell phone or something. But it like, it almost like sort of works with him. So again, I did dig that.
That feels like more sort of proud defiance, you know, just the idea that like in this sort of period, it seemed like Kanye was like, I know he's canceled. I know he beat up his pregnant girlfriend. I'm not saying that's okay, but I know he did it. And he's going to be on my album anyway, you know? And like, I know that you guys hate Lil Pump and, you know, Tekashi 6ix9ine or whatever, but I'm rapping with them now, you know? And it was sort of like this just defiance of everything, which I think was giving some kind of drive to this project that would have pissed a lot of people off, but I would have been there for it. Let's see. Anything else to say? I mean, we could sort of turn back to Yandhi because I think some of this, you know, when we talk about Jesus is King, I might sort of enlighten maybe what he was chasing with Yandhi. But otherwise, I want to spend just a second talking about Sunday service. So if we continue walking through the timeline, I think that somewhere around, you know, who knows when he decided to scrap Yandhi, but he obviously like postponed it indefinitely sometime in November. And then by February, the song I Like It was released on Lil Pump's
I Love It.
It was released on Lil Pump's album. And it, you know, so that means he must have like decided he didn't want the track anymore, right? Because he wouldn't make it like a lead single for both artists on both albums. So by February, he might have sort of moved on from some aspect of this, but I think by January, so somewhere around that time, he had started doing this Sunday service thing where he's like sort of touring around. They were like private parties at first, and then they became public, right, Dan? Sort of performances with a full choir, preacher is there, you know, like the full thing. What did you guys make of this when it was first happening?
Well, I think the first public one was the Coachella, that was live streamed. But I had seen, you know, like Kim had been posting like the private ones on Instagram and stuff. And I've been watching them. And, you know, when you saw little clips here and there, it seemed a little more interesting than it ends up actually being. But, you know, the Coachella one I did watch. And I've watched several more after that. You know, it just sort of like, you want more Kanye when you watch him. You know, it's mostly the choir. Kanye usually will do like Jesus Walks or maybe one other song.
Does a little like sample triggering when
and that's
it suddenly
cool.
turns into like a Detroit house situation.
And that's cool. But I mean, it seems like a thing. Like if it came to town here, obviously I would go. It seems like it would be like sort of really fun to be like there in the moment. But like watching it at home, it's a little boring.
He's a little checked out. What did you make of it, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really like watched, I guess, specifically Sunday service, but what I have seen is I watched that airport karaoke or airplane karaoke with James Corden, which I think is something similar to that, maybe because he has the choir there.
It's basically the same.
So and if we get to the film at some point, I'll talk about it there too. But like, it's entertaining to watch a really great choir just kind of go through some like vocal Olympics, right? Like it's fun to watch for a short while. You know what I mean? Like some of the things that they do is very impressive, but kind of like what you mentioned, Dan, like after a while, it's sort of just like, well, I'm really here for Kanye. Mm-hmm. And there's not a whole lot of Kanye really happening.
It basically just turns into, you just watched church for an hour.
Basically, yeah. And I mean, you contrast that with like that period of time where Kanye was like ranting at every show, you know what I mean? And you would just sit there and listen to him go on and on about just crazy stuff, off the wall stuff. But you would, I felt like I was more invested in listening to that than I am in like, something like
I mean, those, as they're called, visionary streams of consciousness, are much more interesting because, you never know what he's going to say or anything, whereas this, it's sort of like I think I've watched like 4 of them now or so, and they're sort of exactly the same, like nothing's really too different. Maybe they'll play a different song or something, but like essentially what Kanye does is exactly the same each time.
I mean, you always feel like you got a little conned when you sit through the whole thing, because there's not a lot of Kanye. And I do agree that, like, in the room, I bet it's quite exhilarating. And the choir is pretty amazing. And, they really know how to put on a show. And it's really cool how they will often be sort of, dressed in some sort of matching garb or whatever, and they will sometimes, they're all dancing. Sometimes they start moving like in a sort of choreographed circle and stuff like that. Kanye's like sort of sitting at the center of all of it, and it's like visually pretty stunning. Mm-hmm. And I will say that the performance he did the Sunday after Jesus is King came out was live streamed in LA, and he was much more involved than I had seen him up to that point, and it was really the best one. He brought clips out as well. Kenny G was there, and he was sort of, they were doing a lot of Jesus is King stuff, and he was doing his verses and everything, and there was like a lot of sort of jamming. He was just sort of like, you could tell he just wanted to do the Follow God verses again, so they just kind of like, the choir jammed for a little bit. The guy who leads the choir is like really good at kind of like, he'll bring everybody down. He'll like have just the sopranos,
Yeah, that guy's really like interesting to watch and stuff.
Yeah. And then they bring it all back, and he's just like sort of conducting everything, and then you can tell him and Kanye are just kind of like, like a band, like a jam band, just kind of like they're locking eyes, and you can see that Kanye wants to get up and rap again. And so they do it, like when Kenny G played for Use This Gospel, they just like kept doing it, like over and over again. And Kenny G just starts like soloing, and you can just tell they were just sort of having fun with it. There's something like quite alive and interesting about that. Now, what do you think, if we could play like psychologist a little bit, like we sort of were with Yandhi, what do you think sort of drew him to this? I think it's interesting that obviously with the Trump stuff and all of this, he's like getting into some trouble and almost like retreating into some kind of conservatism. Maybe I'm more like way off on that, but for some reason he's really embracing this religious aspect. And he sort of mentioned that he didn't like fully convert when he started the Sunday service thing until even after Coachella. But something started to, maybe the communal aspect of it. I mean, what the jamming maybe? What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Obviously, we're not him, but
right.
I don't know. I hate to like put words in someone's mouth or anything, but like remember during the Trump era of Kanye, like when he went on TMZ and stuff, and he was hanging out with that like lady Candace Owens.
Candace Owens.
Yeah, who she's like some Fox News person or something like that, and he was sort of like saying the things that she was saying, like sort of parroting whatever she said. And then now he's hanging out with like this weird pastor guy and stuff. And then, I don't want to accuse him of like people putting thoughts in his mind and stuff, because I do think like Kanye is legitimately like a very smart person. But it happened to Bob Dylan, like sort of the same sort of way. Like Dylan got into this kind of cult thing. It's called like the Vineyard Christ Church or something like that, and it's like very, very like similar to this. He fell into it, became born again and everything. So I wonder if it is like just the people he's around, because he's susceptible to like sort of like, I don't want to say like trying to fit in, because I don't think it's that, but I can't think of like another way to say it.
I mean, I really get the vibe that it was like an aesthetic thing at first, like this choir moving in a giant circle surrounded by like, I don't know, shrubbery and flowers and stuff. And that maybe like hanging out with this choir all the time and like hearing these sermons and stuff like actually did start to affect him, which, him saying that he didn't actually convert until after Coachella would sort of indicate that there was something like that. I mean, what do you make of this interest in the Sunday service choir, Darren? Yeah,
I mean, I think I've been trying to sort of frame it, in his entire career, like as Kanye, the image, right? And even from the earliest days, I mean, Kanye's kind of always talked about Jesus and God in some way, you know what I mean? Despite what some of his other lyrics may suggest, like he's kind of always had that out there. Obviously, Jesus Walks is a big part of that. And then, in the interviews that he's been giving recently, like he mentions like, like last year was like a really low point for me. But what he points to is like, the MAGA hat, right, being a low point. He talks about, and what he means to me, it sounds like people looking down on him, right? Like just jumping all over him because of all these things that he's doing. And then what he also adds somewhere else in the conversation, he mentions things like, why do I have to think a certain way because of the color of my skin? Like, you know what I mean? Like kind of talking about people's expectations. And, we kind of have always known Kanye to sort of pretty much always go against the expectation, to try to defy what people are expecting. And in this case, I think you're right, Gabe. I mean, I'm certain the Sunday service probably has had some impact on him, but I also think he's thinking about, the Twitter world and like the way people are, millennials these days, his fans, like his fan base, like what they're listening to, what their political beliefs are. And in some ways, I think he's just kind of going against that and saying like, look at me. It's the guy that you think would totally be like the most liberal person or whatever, hanging out with Donald Trump. You know what I mean? Like, what do you guys think about that? I think it's shocking,
I think that's a good point, because he said himself that he's never voted and that he like really doesn't know much about it. So it does sort of seem like often he's just taking the like antagonist.
Contrarian.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like there's a line on the track "Bye Bye Baby" off of from the Yandhi leaks that I think sums it up entirely, where he says, "When they tell me I can't do it, it gives me a rush." I feel like that explains Trump. That explains Christianity. I mean, maybe the conversion ends up being real. We can talk about that, but it's like, as soon as they like you, make them unlike you. Like this has kind of been Kanye's MO for a long time. And, I just feel like a lot of this is reactive, You mentioned Dylan's Christian period, which this is getting a lot of comparisons to. I was also sort of intrigued by the idea of like, we talked about the Rolling Thunder review in a recent episode. And doesn't it feel like Sunday service has that kind of hype around it? Like, what is Kanye doing? And it's, I feel like one day people will talk about it like the Rolling Thunder review.
I think, like the original idea for the Rolling Thunder was that like they would just kind of roll into a town, hang out with some local musicians and stuff. People would join the band, like you wouldn't even know the concert was going to happen, more than a couple days out. It didn't really work because like the money and everything, but Kanye is so rich and now the internet exists. Before they literally handed out flyers and stuff to get at colleges. Right. Whereas now, like you can announce something like all these listening parties and the like shows at the Forum and stuff and LA, like those get announced, the tickets go on sale in an hour, but everybody knows about it, you know, because of the internet. So it's like he sort of is doing that because a lot of the choir is like just people from the local area and stuff. So I think it like really is sort of like a realization,
like a grassroots thing. I mean, he talked about in that Big Boy interview. He talked about like real America. I mean, his like thoughts would constantly change. Remember, he was like, yeah, you know, like Wyoming, like this is like real America, and it feels sort of like, and
that was sort of another thing of the Rolling Thunder was that because it happened in '75, you know, it was almost the bicentennial and everything. You know, they talk about that in the movie. So the other odd thing is, I think it was about a year ago now. Like, I remember Kanye like tweeted like at Bob Dylan like to talk to him and stuff. So like I
no, I don't remember that.
Yeah, I wish I had the tweet in front of me. But yeah, he said like you know, let's work together or something. Of course, I don't think Dylan ever responded. But it's like that really was at like the start of this. So I like, part of me does wonder, like, did Kanye like learn about the Rolling Thunder and like sort of expand upon that idea or what, you know?
It's just so fun that like I feel like with the leaks and the Sunday service, you just like get these little glimpses into like what's going on in his mind, you know, and it's like one of the most fascinating minds like in music history, obviously. So it's like tantalizing, you know, you can't resist like playing psychologist. But let's move in to Jesus is King, the main event here, and we can sort of bounce back to some of this stuff as we like. But you know, as you read about his conversion, like, you know, renouncing rap, basically saying he's going to be a gospel artist from now on. He started to hold these little listening parties in September, this previous September, with you know, these little IG clips would come out, you know, Kim's Instagram and stuff. I mean, what were your like expectations? What did you think Jesus is King was going to be like?
I mean, part of me knew that you know, an album called Jesus is King, don't get your hopes up too high. but then the other part of me was like, Jesus Walks is you know, one of the greatest songs ever. Right. Kanye's,
I was imagining an album of Ultra Light Beams.
Yeah, that's another one and stuff. So, you know, I thought maybe it'll just be a regular record and he's just calling it that, you know, like it wouldn't really be like 100% Christian, you know, like even after the first like listening party, you know, everybody said it was like played so loud that you couldn't like, it was so loud that you couldn't hear it. But they were like, yeah, I'm pretty sure he doesn't cuss at all. And it was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. People seem to forget that 808s has no cussing on it either. So, like, you know, that never worried me or anything. But, yeah, part of me was don't get your hopes up. More a part of me was I hope it's just Jesus Walks and Ultra Light Beams for, you know, a whole record.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kanye since Dark Fantasy has basically earned my attention anytime he's doing listening parties or talking about the run up to an album, even though I feel like each subsequent album has been less and less, I guess, interesting in terms of like the storyline, I suppose. But here, you know, I was like, okay, I mean, it's going to be new Kanye. Like, we'll see what goes on. It was really once I saw like the track listing that I was like, nope. I don't think that this is gonna. Yeah, at that point, yes, I was beginning to worry for sure.
I was really not worried at all. I was feeling very confident. I was like, you know what, he's saying this, and I bet it's gonna end up being like, you know, Ultra Light Beam or something. You know, his idea of gospel.
I mean, he called Pablo. He said that was going to be a gospel album, and then right.
So I was kind of like calling his bluff. The listening party clips that would come out, you know, it was obviously extremely loud, and the, you know, phone recordings, like you couldn't really tell what was going on, but you could hear that there were like some fucking bangers. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like maybe I was hearing, you know, Follow God and stuff like that, but you could hear like, yeah, there's some slappers. He's, you know, this is going to be like a hip hop album. I think this is going to be fine. And like I said, you know, if he had moved on to like a fully formed sort of classic, Ye would be the outlier. And so I really felt like this was going to be a course correction. I felt especially good, you know, bad, but good when he delayed the album by like about a month, you know, because I was like, oh my God, we're about to get another Rush thing. Because at those listening parties, he was talking about like recording verses and, had to fix this, had to change this. And I was like, oh God. And then he postponed it by a month. And I was like, great. He's going to give it the time it needs to finish it. It's not going to be an overnight 4 a.m. thing. Of course, it ended up being that. But, I just thought like, he's going to pull this off. I really felt that way. I wanted to talk about now before anybody got to hear the album. He released this IMAX film, also called Jesus is King, and I didn't see it, but you guys both saw it, and
together.
We haven't actually talked about it.
Yeah,
together. Little date. We haven't actually talked about it. So can you kind of tell me what that was about? What did you think watching that?
Well, it was. First off, I love the Runaway movie from Dark Twisted Fantasy, so I was kind of excited for this. But what it is there's this artist named James Turrell. He's been working on this like installation out. It's in a like an active volcano, I think in Arizona, but don't at me if I'm wrong. He's been working on it since the 70s, and it's still not done. And only like a few people have ever like been inside of it. His friends. He's held like some fundraisers where you paid like thousands of dollars to get to go inside and stuff. And so this was like Kanye paid him $1 million to be able to film this movie in there. And this is like sort of the first look that like the general public has gotten inside of this. It's called the Rodin Crater, and it's like a rad art piece that I like knew about before this. So I was excited like just because of that. But the movie is it's the crater, but then it's just the Sunday service essentially inside of this crater. I'll let you add on, Darren.
Yep. So, kind of similar to what you mentioned, like I love the Runaway film. I love like the way, like how artistic the Power music video was, you know what I mean?
Right.
So
yeah, that's great.
I came into this thinking that, again, this is going to be something really visually appealing to look at. And I mean, largely it is like, it's very interesting to watch, how it's filmed, kind of what's happening in the background. But as far as like the content, like what's actually happening on screen, yeah, I mean, it's largely the Sunday service with that really animated,
choir leader
guy who's like just kind of leading the way. And like I mentioned, early on, like it's fun to watch. Like, they do some really, really cool stuff as a choir that I was like very, impressed by. But then, the film is like what, like 30 minutes long or so?
It's just under 30 minutes, yeah.
Maybe like halfway through, you're kind of already getting to the point where it's like, all right, I mean, I've seen enough. Not much really changes. Kanye starts to appear, but he seems like he's just sort of like... Hi, Dan, I think I remarked to you this. I was like, it seems like he's hearing all of this for the first time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's just kind of like, he kind of nods his head a little bit, like he's going to get into something, but he doesn't actually do anything. Like he doesn't like start rapping right then and there or anything like it had been rehearsed. It's really like he's just there listening and just kind of like bobbing his head to it. Then there's like, there are like little transitions where you see like a Bible verse and then another Sunday service song happens. There's an entire segment dedicated to people just crying and hugging each other.
Oh yeah, that was so weird. I mean,
by that point in the film, I'm like kind of like, all right, now you're beating me over the head with this. You know what I mean?
I can't believe it was tiring after 30.
Yeah. No, that was the thing, because the opening shot is like fucking so good. It starts with Celia, Selah, whatever, however the fuck you say it. But it starts at like the the hallelujah, hallelujah. And so like imagine it being really in a movie theater and it is fucking booming, and the shot is so great. It's like rising up from the Rodin Crater. And like when that's going on, I was like, in my head, I said, he did it again, motherfucker. He did it again. He did it again. I was like, this is going to be so great. And so, that's going on, and it's like a great version of that track. Like, I wish
So it's not the album version then.
It's not exactly the same because it starts at the Hallelujah
it's the IMAX
part.
version.
Yeah, and at the credits it says the IMAX. Yeah, I do sort of want to see the film post the album so I could see what the differences are. But yeah, it does that, and that scene is so great. But then each song is like its own little section, and there's nothing tying it all together. Like there's just like a 5-second clip of, you know, a Bible verse on screen. It's like, okay, well now we're on to the next thing. Like there's shots of just like up close on a flower, and then like there's like a deer running. It's like each thing, there's like nothing. It's sort of like the album. It's like sort of rushed and just kind of poorly pieced together. Because there's some cool moments, like Kanye in the crater, just him and like two other guys. Like one's playing the piano and stuff, and he's singing. And God, I can't remember what song it was now. It just left me. But he's like sort of just like very like sweetly singing. It's from 808s, a song, and that's like really cool.
Say You Will.
I can't remember. And then he sings to one of his kids like later on. It's like a really close up shot on him like holding one of his like really small children, and just like sort of humming and singing lightly to it, and like that's like it's pretty like sweet and like humanizing of Kanye and stuff. But like in between that, all it is like these Sunday service things again, and like Darren said, like it's interesting to see this choir, that like choir leader guy is like super animated and like, you know, has like such control of all these people, and that's really cool. But like it's the same thing over and over and over again. Okay. Like, you know, anything you get tired of in 30 minutes is kind of not that great, I think, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So that came out, and then within a couple days, we got the album Jesus is King. It was supposed to release at midnight, but of course it was not till around noon the following day that we actually got it. But all right, I'll forgive him. So I want to know, like, your first impressions. The first time you listened to this album, what did you think?
Yeah, right when it came out, like you had texted, and me and my wife had like just left. We were driving to West Palm Beach, and so we're in the car. So, you know, of course we throw it right on, and you know, the first song starts, and it's just the Sunday choir thing. You know, it's sort of an intro, okay, and then the first song, I remember, like as soon as he says that, like he like mentions a specific verse, like John 8:3. Yeah. Me and my wife just both sort of looked at each other like, it really is going to be just a Christian rap album. And, you know, like we listened to the whole thing, and it was sort of like, I remember thinking like sort of halfway through, I was kind of like, getting a little tired of this, and the whole time I was just like, I just make it to the Clips verse, you know, like I love Clips. I was like, that'll save it, that'll be so great. We'll get to that later, but you know, we listened to it like I think 3 times back to back, even though you know, just to see if we missed something. But yeah, my first impressions were not that excited for it.
What about you, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the opening was fine. I think Selah was fine. You know, I was familiar with it, obviously, from the film. And then pretty much from then on, I was sort of feeling pretty underwhelmed, I think. And more along the lines of like, yeah, this is kind of what I was expecting. And I had sort of had my expectations pretty low, and that's pretty much where I felt like it was at least after the first full listen.
Yeah. You know, I was like immediately struck by how, you know, chaotic and sloppy it felt. You know, every hour seems to just sort of like start right in the middle.
Clips right in.
Yeah. And it actually clips right out too. And it's like, I just felt like, you know, I started the track, and I you know, like sometimes when you like kind of hit play on something, and like maybe for some reason it like
like
glitches,
your
and
finger hit the track, you know, or something. Yeah,
and you like, you know, for some reason you didn't get the very beginning. I'm like, was that right? And it's like,
you'll never know what the
we're just right into it, you know. And so it was like, oh, fuck, you know, it was a little abrupt. And then like Selah, you know, it feels a little bit more like an intro track where it's like, okay, you know, we're going to do this slow organ build and everything. But then it kind of like rifles right through in the course of 2 minutes and 45 seconds, like this really grand, every step along the way of this grand buildup. And then it's like immediately over. Follow God is 1 minute and 45 seconds. And I'm just feeling like I can't catch my breath, like we're just like rifling through shit. And then I was kind of like, I thought it was so bizarre that when we hit water, all of a sudden it kind of mellowed out and slowed down. The last couple tracks are like 3.5 minutes, which are like actual song lengths. And after the breakneck pace of the first half, I was like bored in the second half, so I was just immediately like, oh no, this, I don't know what he did with that month delay, but this sounds like something that was, rushed overnight, basically. So we've spent obviously more time with it. Let's try to describe the overall sound of Jesus is King.
I mean, it's about Jesus and him being king. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a gospel rap album. But I will say the instrumental, when you think of like Christian rock or anything, it usually tends to sound. The little bit I've heard, it tends to sound like usually kind of like cheap or something, and maybe it is because there's not that much money behind it. I'll say like this doesn't sound like that. It still at least sounds like a pop record from a major label artist and stuff. It's. I don't know. It cycles through between having like the Sunday service choir, in every hour, that sort of like returns kind of in water. It's just so like messy. There's not like really like one overarching sound. I don't think.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. How would you describe it, Darren?
It is pretty tricky. I mean, he certainly stays on theme pretty much the entire way through. So that's something. I mean,
I want to dive into the lyrics, but it's kind of like, instrumentally, would these songs stand out on Pablo? I mean, does it feel like sonically a step forward like we're used to from him, or what?
I think some of them. And by judging on the leaks and stuff, I think it's sort of the ones that we at least know have like been in the hopper for a bit, like Selah.
Right.
That was not in the Yandhi leaks that we took from the whiteboard, but there is a leak of that. And that is like really great too. That leak, it's so much better.
I think Follow God is a strong, track
I agree.
You know what I mean? It is incredibly short, but
I mean, it's kind of like, it's weird because I think that, and this is sort of retroactive because I am somebody who did not listen to the Yandhi leaks before Jesus is King came out because I didn't want to spoil anything or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like so disappointed with this that I was like, what, fuck it, I'm listening to these leaks. And, so in retrospect, it kind of sounds like a bunch of unused like Yandhi demos that have been repurposed for this new theme. And so some of the tracks are very hip hop, like Follow God, On God. These are like banging beats, Others are, a little bit more of like a combination. I mean, Selah feels like it's supposed to be like Ultra Light Beam Part 2. It's kind of got like it's like a fine mixture of like Kanye's style, particularly dark apocalyptic Kanye,
very dramatic,
with the choir. Other times the choir is not even present, and so and they'll like pop up just a little bit, like on Water you mentioned. And so it makes for sort of a weird album where it feels like, a bunch of stuff that he was doing before he got into the Sunday service vibe. And then a couple things he added the Sunday service choir to kind of give it some sort of unity, but it's kind of like a bunch of demos. And I will say, I was also struck immediately by the poor mixing here.
Oh, God, yes.
And, like Follow God sounds literally like a demo, because it is clipping and distorted so much that, what I'm saying? It just feels like we talked about Pablo sounding like a bunch of demos, sorta, but this sounds way more like a bunch of demos to me.
Yeah, I mean, did nobody like listen to the record before they put it up? Did nobody like put some consumer grade headphones on and like check how it sounded? Because like I said, when I first listened to it, we were driving, we listened to it in the car. The mixing issues weren't as like noticeable,
Right.
you know, because it's better speakers, louder, you know, whatever. But like that night, you know, we were staying in a hotel. I listened to it like before I went to bed, and just immediately the first time I listened to it in headphones, I was like, oh my God, like, you know, I thought Pablo was bad. But Ye, I kind of remembered this re-listening to it this week. Like Ye has like the exact problems. Like there's some tracks on Ye that are clipping like so horribly that it almost makes you think like, are my headphones broken or something?
I know it does, but like listening now, it feels like all those tracks are kind of like fully fleshed out. Whereas like Follow God is just
I
that
get what
it's
you
just
mean.
you could have made that track in like an afternoon. It's just like a vocal loop, like Father I stretch, you know, and like this repeating beat, and that's the entire, you know, track. You know, if you listen to like Storm from Yandhi, you can tell that one's like a little farther along than some of the others, because like during X's verse, there's all that like, you know, amazing beat work, you know what I mean, where like the beat drops out, sometimes there's just a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it's like evolving underneath the verse and like making the whole verse crescendo in this beautiful way. A lot of these are just like the beat is kind of just running. There's not a lot of changes or inventiveness in that way. You know what I mean, Darren?
Yeah, for sure. Because like you look no further than like on Dark Fantasy, like some of the tracks on there where the, like you mentioned, the beat drops, and like you can almost tell that like the beat is running, and somebody deliberately is like, no, this would make the song that much better. But you know what I mean? Like just kind of being very tedious about every moment in the song and trying to find the right pockets. I mean, you could that just happens when you listen to something over and over again and you continue to tweak it, right? Here it just feels like that whole tweaking period wasn't really what was happening. And I imagine when Kim comes out and it's like, yeah, sorry guys, it's got to be delayed because they got to do some mixing stuff. I think they're dealing with these like audio issues and much less of like trying to improve the song. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like
the song.
Develop it. Yes, that's the word.
Yeah, I just feel like you can't just like make a song and then it be done. You know, like even the shitty music I'll make. You know, you'll make something, you listen to it, you're like, oh, you know, that sounds good, I think I'm done or something. But then, you know, you let it sit for a couple days, you listen, and then you can hear. You know, like whenever you're working on a puzzle or so, you know, if you step away and come back, like you see things that you didn't see before and stuff. And I feel like he's not doing that, and so he never like sees those things that are missing or that should be fixed, or you know, just like that would improve
even like
it, you know.
But it's weird because there's even like steps back, I think, because again, to refer to the storm, which ended up being Everything We Need, you know, it's almost like a full minute longer in the
leak,
and it's not just the you know, the X verse. It's also like there are these kind of like interesting. I think it's Ant Clemens who's all over this. Might be Ty Dolla $ign, I don't know, but like the vocals are sort of intersecting and layering. It's like the song just kind of like goes. It sort of explores these different textures and stuff. And you know, it seems kind of like, I don't know, he got him to re-record "Girl, You Owe It to Yourself" as "We Got Everything We Need," you know, and didn't have time to re-record all of the like layering and stuff that goes on there. So it's really like pared down and simplified. You know, in regard to like if this feels like a huge step forward, I guess it doesn't really. It feels like a bunch of unused stuff. I can even imagine like, you know, Follow God. Like I imagine most of the stuff was like sort of started in Yandhi, and then some of the stuff like Follow God, it might have just been like a beat that was sitting around, you know, and he was like, oh yeah, that's got like a nice Christian sample on it that would be good here. You know what I mean? It just feels like really like slapdash sort of.
Like the whole record like sort of like reeks of like you had a school project and you waited until the last second, you know, and even you got an extension on it, but you still like you still wait until the extension's almost over. Like the whole record like sort of reeks of that, and like Ye like sort of reeked of it, but I think like and maybe it's just like, when you see this is even like worse, like it at least seems like sort of put together, like there's some things that are wrong with it, but I think like overall, it's fine. It seems like at least a little labored over, but like so much stuff here, like there's not that like that laboredness of it. Like I said, like Selah or whatever, like that one is an older song, and it has it a little bit, like that song is to me that was my favorite song on the record, I think.
Yeah, because like it's such a like it's amazing, right? At the end with that like hoota hoota hoota, comes in like underneath, like that's a cool little touch that you don't think of on the first couple days working on a track, you know what I mean? And it just elevates the end so much, like it adds such a level, and like just the way the hallelujahs build up and stuff, you can tell that thing was worked on a lot more than most of the other songs here.
Exactly.
But I want to get into the lyrics. We got to spend some time on that, obviously. Pitchfork's review kind of says that all we really get here is a bunch of like slogans, like the kind of shorthand stuff that you would hear on any Christian album or whatever. Do you agree with that, Darren, or do you think there's something more here?
I mean, I think partially. Like, I don't think that much is being said, just in the sense of, like, I don't know, attempting to be poetic or deep or moving in some way, because and I know we're going to talk about this, but, like, my belief system, or lack thereof, right, is obviously on my mind as I'm listening to this, and I'm wondering, like, what's the motive? Is he trying to convince me of something, or is he celebrating just what he believes in, and I'm just meant to check it out from afar? And I don't feel like there's much of the, like, trying to convince me of anything or trying to impress anybody. To me, it's much more of, like, kind of like slogany and using lines like John 8:33 and he saved a wrench like me, borrowing that kind of stuff. Like, and even the movie felt like that too, right, Dan? Because like he was putting like fairly famous like Bible quotes.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like deep digging.
No, exactly. Yeah. That's a good point, Darren. Like I've never been to church in my entire life, but every Bible or at least almost all the Bible verses he put up on the screen, I knew what they were. Like I've heard them before. John 3:16. Right. Everybody knows that. I'm more of an Austin 3:16 man myself, but it sort of seems like surface level Christianity, like a person who just got into it or something. And judging from like the Zane Lowe interview where he said he got into it in April, which was around Coachella, it's accurate, it does sort of seem like the slogan version of Christianity. And I like sort of in preparation for this podcast, I listened to those like Dylan Christian records. And I thought about this question like during it, and it seemed like Dylan like had a bigger grasp of like Christianity. Like some of the stuff he talks about in those records is like, beyond me. Like I don't really like know what he's talking about or something. But here it's all like, he mentions Jezebel, and so it's like things that anyone who grew up in America like knows this. It's just sort of like cultural things.
He uses these slogans in those interviews too. He says things like "Let go and let God" and "Jesus take the wheel."
Yeah.
Like that's. I mean, that's where he's at, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that. Well, whatever. Fuck it. I'm gonna offend some people. It's like I find Christianity is kind of like that for like 99% of people. It's like if you ever watch a church service or something, it's like they're saying like Hallmark level shit. Like Jesus said, like treat others like you would like to be treated, and everybody's like jotting it down in their notes, like, oh my fucking god, like I never even thought of that. And it's like the dumbest shit that I don't know how anybody thinks it's deep, but. What I eventually decided is that like what you get here is a bunch of slogans, and then every once in a while like a little look through the cracks or something, which is the album that I wanted, So he mentions, right, like I think on the track God Is, right? He says, "Jesus saved me, now I'm sane." you know? And it's pretty apparent to me that his like mental health crisis of the last couple of years, you know, on Yandhi, he's like actually really proud about being off his meds and like being unleashed, you know?
Right.
His hospitalization and stuff. I mean, it's pretty clear that he found, like a lot of people do, Christianity as like some sort of coping mechanism. In my opinion, that's a very unhealthy, fucked up way to treat your mental health, but that's what he's using it for, right? And so you get this little peek into like behind the scenes of like what's drawn him to this, you know, with a line like that. He mentions stuff like on that same song. He says like, this my kids, this my crib, this my wife, this my life. You know, it's like there's a certain paranoia about, I don't know, fucking up his life or like losing his family. I mean, Closed on Sunday is like basically seems to be talking to Kim and saying like, we need to have Sunday as a family day or something, and like not let, you know, people, you know, vipers in, not let people indoctrinate.
Put the gram away.
Yeah, put the gram away on Sundays so we have this day to ourselves. You know, don't let Jezebels in here. You know, there's like some sort of paranoia going on, and that Christianity is some way to like sort of save his family or something. I don't know if his mental health was actually damaging his relationship with his family or what, you know what I mean? Like you get these little peaks. I'm like, that's the album I want. Like, tell me more, you know?
Exactly.
Because in fantasy, we get to see like all the way in, you know what I mean? Like the shit that he's like, his regrets and his like ego and how it's like destroying things and how his, you know, all this stuff. And that's what the album's about. This album that's like the subtext. And then he again and again just retreats into slogans. I think like the last song, Jesus is Lord, is like the perfect example where like it's just a short lyric where it's just like submitting, giving up to God. And I feel like that's what this album is like occasional mentions of his issues and then just like, but you know what? God's going to take care of it. And that's not very interesting to me.
No, I completely agree. You know, it's not that interesting. I don't know if I wanted like, I don't know if I would find it more interesting if he was like steeped in Christianity and was, you know, telling me a sermon or something. I don't know that I would like that either. But yeah, I mean, give us the peek at like why you're doing this instead of just like telling us the slogans that you enjoy or that you heard or that led you to it. You know,
just comfort you.
Yeah, exactly.
Make you feel better and make you not have to face like the reality of what you're going through. You know?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's really odd. Another odd thing is why isn't Chance on this? The other like sort of Christian rapper, you know? Why?
There are almost no guests on
but
this. Like, what's up with that?
It's really like crazy. I don't know. Did just people not want to be on it? Did everyone have like such a hard time not swearing? I know, like, I
mean, doesn't it feel like he was talking about New Body? He needed Nicki to re-record her verse, and then it ended up not on the album. But doesn't it feel like Follow God or something had, you know, like a guest verse on it in whatever original form it was, and he just had to cut it?
And I know, like, some of the songs did, like, On God at one point, Young Thug was on that. He's like,
or did you notice, like, on Hands On, it sounds very much like Young Thug. Like, I don't know what the fuck he's saying, but he's like, hold it deaf, you know? And it just sounds like a little clip of like, this was some full thing he did for something else, and it's just used as a little transition here. But you know what I'm saying, Darren? Like, don't we need some more voices on this album?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. You know, look at like Ultralight Beam, you know, the song that we continue to point to as being like, that would be the album we would want to hear. I mean, Chance is on there, as you mentioned. I think Kanye's, just in general, Kanye's records, we've always talked about this. He always brings out the best of his guests, you know what I mean? And even if it's an album about Jesus, I would still trust that Kanye would know how to bring the best out of the people. But, you know, going back to like this whole slogan stuff and just thinking about like Ultralight Beam and like why do I like that song so much more? I mean, obviously, musically, sonically, it's really like incredible, but also, I mean, like lyrically, like they're, you know, he's talking about like Ultralight Beam. This is like God Dream. It's like really large, abstract stuff. Like I would prefer him to go kind of deeper into that realm, into this abstract world where like, you know, we're not talking in slogans. We're talking kind of beyond what the simple understanding of like Christianity and Jesus. You know what I mean?
I think that's a really good point. Something like Ultralight Beam, like, sort of reads to me like somebody who's, quote unquote, like spiritual, maybe in like a sort of Christian sense, like he believes in Jesus and stuff, but like he's not well, like, versed in the Bible, maybe isn't, actively going to church, but he believes it. And you're coming up with like you said, like sort of like your own, system around that or whatever, whereas like this is just like he's repeating things that like somebody told him or he read or whatnot, which is a much less interesting thing to listen to.
I mean, so like if you think about, there's a verse on the track Water, which is getting a lot of hate because he just says like, Jesus is this, Jesus this, Jesus is this, over and over again, right? And there's something interesting there because it's like an important part. I guess I don't want to go too off the rails, but like there's something meditative and quite spiritual about repetition. You know what I mean? Like this is like why all the 60s minimalists were into like Eastern religion and stuff, because, just repetition or something, you know what I'm saying? Like this kind of meditative quality. And there is something interesting about, there are prayers and approaches to Christianity where you're kind of like just repeating Jesus's name or something. Like that's how you can reach him. You're reaching out to somebody, you're pleading with somebody, something like that. And so imagine if like instead of that verse or in addition to that verse, there were some lines about like, as long as I just keep, repeating Jesus's name, I don't have to think about blank. You know what I mean? Like if we got a little
give
insight,
a reason for it.
Yeah. So all we have is like some kind of empty like repetition,
right.
But it could have been really interesting. I feel like it could have been a Christian album and been like absolutely phenomenal. I do want to talk about like, let's dive into some of the songs, like highlights, lowlights. What jumped out of you guys?
Well, I'll say the absolute low light for me is Closed on Sunday. That song, it's just stupid, like, I mean, the whole,
but it's sort of like an interesting instrumental, isn't it? Like it feels like it's building and then
a little bit, because, and what made me think that the most is, he went on Jimmy Kimmel and he played it live, and the live version is so much more interesting and like sort of like brooding and darker and stuff, which is always like Kanye really like sort of shines at that like sort of apocalyptic like darkness.
There's a little bit of that here,
a little bit, but then he ruins at the end where he's like Chick-fil-A, like
like so, he didn't know where to like. No, it sounds like it's about to pop off.
Yeah, and he's just like, I don't know what to do.
And it's extra annoying that like the previous song had ended with him just screaming.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Like, he's a style.
It's almost the same.
Didn't know
thing.
How to end it.
It's almost the exact same thing. That song is just like the epitome of like corniness on this record. You're my number one with the lemonade. Like, what a stupid line.
I don't like super mind the corniness. I don't like fully get the line. I don't think it like is a great line or anything, but it's like, what's weird about it is like sort of the problematic nature of it. A lot of people complain about Violent Crimes from Ye, where he was like, I basically treated women like shit until I had a daughter, and now I realized they're people,
Yeah.
And on this one, he's kind of like, I don't know, like sort of preaching at his wife, like, put your phone away, spend time with your family, like Jezebels aren't allowed in here.
Well, I
like
think
slutty women, it's like,
I think from that Zane Lowe interview, I think he's sort of talking to himself, because he's like says in that he like was addicted to porn and like looking at, thoughts, as the kids call them on Instagram. And stuff. So I think he's a little bit talking to himself, but I get, it is sort of like if he is talking,
it's like controlling and weird. I don't know.
Well, I mean, and there's some stuff floating, who knows the truth behind it, but like about how like he's not going to let his daughters have like makeup until they're like 18 or whatever. You know what I mean? And like, oh, who knows? But I mean that's probably part of the conversation in some way. I mean, I don't really see Kim Kardashian coming out and being like, yeah, I'm all Christian now. So, if he's taking this seriously, then I imagine maybe some of that's weird, right?
Out. It makes you think back to Yandhi, where it's like, what did Kim think when he was writing all these songs like about fake bitches who get plastic surgery and like post on Instagram all the time and stuff? And like,
he's literally talking about her family and her.
I mean, like, was that like damaging to his relationship? Could that have been part of the reason he ended up scrapping it? But like, some of those attitudes are still here. I mean, again, playing psychologist, but it's interesting how out of step his attitudes are with his like new family's business. What else jumped out at you, Darren?
I really, I actually like the end of Follow God when he's just like talking to his dad. And
that is funny.
He's like, ah! Like, that is classic.
It's sort of
Kanye.
funny, yeah.
I just nothing in particular I felt like was like, obviously truly amazing. I mean, I like Selah. We've been talking about that song quite a bit. I will admit that there are some songs that just kind of stuck in my head, like melodies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Water being one of them, even though I just didn't feel like I was enjoying the song. Kenny G's part in Use This Gospel just like would just play in my head. Maybe it's because he's just strangely playing by himself.
Yeah,
it was kind of a weird choice.
Since you bring up the Kenny G thing, like, and him just like play, like, doesn't that seem like incredibly tacked on? Like it's like sort of like,
I mean, absolutely.
It like feels like sort of like, oh, wouldn't it be sort of like funny if Kenny G played for a sec? And people are like, thinking it's really good, but he sucks. Kenny G sucks. Like, it's just like I hate.
Well, they're gonna at you, Dan. They're coming for you.
It'd be cool if like that beat was going on.
Yeah, it's just
exactly cool when they jammed it at the Sunday service I was talking about. Like, it was really actually awesome. But it feels really tacked on, and also like Push's verse is like offbeat at points. Did you notice that? Like, because there's like the door sound, like ding, 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 and like he kind of is like off sometimes, which also gives a tacked on quality. Sometimes like the Selah, when like the beats are hitting, it feels like they're hitting a little early. There's sort of a weird sloppiness there. I wanted to highlight On God, which is like an absolute banger. But here's the thing. Kanye has been sort of walking a fine line in the last few years where he's kind of like playing maestro, he's like assembling talent and, working like Miles Davis or something, or like a film director where he's like getting the best out of people. He's assembling everything, piecing it together. And it gets a little tricky, right? Because it's like, how much is he doing? There's rumors and stuff that he kind of just leaves people to work on stuff, and he like pops in periodically and is like, what you got? And he still has managed to sort of own his albums, where like every song on Pablo sounds like a Kanye song completely, when I listen to On God, what I hear for the first time, I think, in Kanye's career is like a great Pierre Bourne beat with that like amazing synth line, just incredible. But I'm like, damn, I end up walking away like Pierre Bourne fucking rules, and it was fun that Kanye rapped over the top of his song. You know what I mean? Like, it's not gelling the way it used to. It doesn't feel like he's the director, the auteur in charge.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because we've talked about it like with Dark Twisted and Pablo and everything. Like, some people, plebs, will bitch like, oh, there's 100 writers on this song. Right. Who cares? When you think of a your favorite movie director, he didn't make the whole goddamn movie by himself. Oh, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. No GDs on this podcast. But
we'll bleep all of it out. Don't worry.
Yeah. But like I always thought that was like sort of a good thing about Kanye. It was like in the tradition of Miles and stuff, like assembling. Like he had this eye for talent. I mean, because how many people, did you hear for the first time on a Kanye record? Nicki Minaj, Designer,
070 Shakes recently.
He's been doing it.
How pissed, by the way, must like Ant Clemens be? He was like clearly going to be like the new star.
Oh, yeah, he would have.
And then that whole shit got scrapped. Like,
no,
fuck,
exactly.
Man, this was his breakout moment.
Kanye is
even
like
Chance blew up completely with Ultra Lucky.
No, exactly. Big Sean, like he's like created so many of these like people, and I think that's like that was like such a great thing about Kanye, is because each record you're like, or at least almost all the records, you find out about a new artist or something like in the process of it.
He made Nicki a star with her monster verse.
No, exactly.
Like, again and again, and yet this feels like
there's none of that.
Pierre Bourne was already a star, and he didn't really need Kanye on this track. Like, Playboy Cardi could have been on it; it would have been awesome. You get what I'm saying, Darren? Like, he's not the auteur he once was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know.
And think about like how checked out he seems in the Sunday services, you know? It almost feels like an album of that, where he's just sort of sitting, you know, vibing, nodding his head.
Yeah,
and
again,
other people are coming up with stuff.
Do you think
Exactly.
do you think it's because like music isn't his only focus now? You know, like he has like the brand Yeezy, and you know he's clearly like really likes designing clothes and shoes and everything, which is great.
He's just like stretched too thin now to just be able to
exactly, because
focus.
not only does he have that business, but I mean he has 4 kids. He's got a wife. You know, he's got a family. Like.
Yeah, can't really like hole up in Hawaii for
no, exactly.
Yeah,
like I think that's like part of it, and you know, I don't. Obviously, he's not going to give up Yeezy. You know, it's a $1 billion company now, so it's like it's almost like has music taken the back seat? Like, is that just something he does for fun now? Is that why like he just rushes an album out? You know. In a month or two, or maybe less, maybe more. We don't really know. You know, like
the number 1 Google search term, right? Is that what he kept on?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, which is great. I mean, I'm happy for him, but like, is it okay to like release a inferior product like because of that?
I mean, there was like that notorious article for back in like I don't know 2015 where somebody Jason Green released the article. Kanye's going to drop a brick and it's going to hurt. Okay. That's a whole nother story that I won't get into, but the idea of that article is that he's too invested in other things than music right now. And yet Pablo like worked like crazy. I mean, Pablo, the premiere was basically the soundtrack for his like Yeezy season 3 clothing line. Right. And it was just awesome. You know, it was just amazing. And, you know, and then you think about like how inventive he was with the St. Pablo tour, like how incredible that was. The Wyoming project seemed like, you know, ended up being quite rushed, but it was still a huge undertaking. I just don't know. I that sounds right to me, but it's like he's kind of proved me wrong when I thought that would be the case in the past.
I will say that like Pablo like sort of seemed intertwined with the, you know, clothing and everything, because, you know, Wolves premiered at season 1.
Right.
You know, each Fade, I think it was Fade, was it season 2? You know, like each one there was like some sort of like music involved with it, you know, culminating with the record and season 3 and everything. You know, that sort of like has gone away now. You know, I mean, I think Ye seems like very rushed and everything. And like this Wyoming, you know, he moved to Wyoming and all for the record. Now he's like moved his business there. So, you know, it seems like since Ye, it's been split attention to me.
Yeah, more than ever. Okay, so I want to talk about like, I guess we talked a little bit about it, but like, could this album have worked? Could he pull it off? Something that occurred to me is like Kanye's pretty interesting because I associate him personally with like, you know, cramming as many ideas in as physically possible. You know, that's like the maximalism of dark fantasy. Pablo is like just actually overflowing with ideas. And yet, you know, he quite famously, I kind of remember these days, like it's a long time ago now, but Kanye was kind of like threatening to make 808s. He was like, I'm going to make an entire album where I sing an auto-tune and it's like really minimal with just 808 drums. And everybody's like, he won't do that, you know? And then he fucking did it, you know? And, you know, obviously not everybody loves that album. Can't dispute that it was super influential, but it was certainly interesting to hear him in like one track mind mode. You know what I mean? And this is kind of like, you might say that Yeezus is pretty focused as well, but, you know, does it feel like, because initially I was thinking like, damn, Kanye can't pull off this really hyper-focused thing. Like, I'm going to make a gospel album. But do you think that's not actually the case?
I mean, I think he could. I think he just needs to like, he like gets ahead of like it's almost like he gets excited and he's like, I'll have it done, you know, by this time, you know, and he tweets about it. And then like the pressure's on, even like after you postpone it, like still you can only postpone it like so far before people like get mad or don't care anymore. And so he should really like, especially if he's going to split his time with other things, I mean, you don't have to release an album every year. I mean, obviously, I would love a great
maybe
Kanye
like
record.
One way to like make it happen is to be like, you know what? I'm not going to do everything. I'm going to do like this one focused project on this one focused topic. And like, that's the only way you can get anything done. You know kind of know what I'm saying, Darren?
Yeah. I mean, your question initially was like, could this have worked? And I mean, that's, to me, I look at this in two different ways. Like, number one, could this have worked as a Christian album? Like, yes. See Ultralight Beam, see all our comments about how it could have been a deeper album. Could it have worked if you just strip away all the Jesus is King stuff and kind of just make Yandhi, right?
Yeah.
Again, the answer is yes. I mean, Yandhi is, I think of that album in two different ways. Like, it could go the dark fantasy route and like really hammer into every single song, or it could go like a Pablo route and still be good. You know what I mean? Or, even if it doesn't even if it still sounds like he could have put some more attention towards it or whatever. I mean, I think Kanye's capable of juggling multiple multimedia enterprises and projects and all of this sort of stuff. And I think kind of what you were saying, Dan, like maybe he likes that pressure of like saying, all right, I got a deadline. I just put it out there. Now's the time
and
to
on
start
that note,
working.
I think it's kind of interesting how like, Yeezus 10 songs, right? And then ever since then, even Pablo, the first track list he posted, on Twitter was 10 songs. And he's like been interested in sort of reeling himself in, maybe because he knows otherwise it'll never get done.
Yeah,
And it's like,
exactly that.
And like Pablo like just grew and grew and grew. Kind of humorously, like Chance is being like, no, dude, you got to put Waves on the album, and so it just sort of grew. But the Yandhi track list, the first one, 10 songs. The, Wyoming project, he just was like arbitrarily, each album will be 7 songs long, and I'm going to not break that rule until fucking Tiana Taylor, for some reason, I'll make it 8 songs. But, there's some sort of like, he just seems to be like, I don't know, like I gotta constrain myself or I'll never complete anything. And even that's not totally working. I wonder, do you feel like, having now heard Jesus is King, does it shed any light on all the stuff we talked about earlier, the stuff that he's been sort of chasing throughout the year? I think about like, it's interesting to re-listen to Ye and Kids See Ghosts. There's a lot of like talk about transcendence and, freedom. Jesus is King is full of lyrics about like finding freedom from something, and it's like, I don't know, there's stuff like, I'm so reborn, or like, now I feel very free, and like, that was all over those. He was like kind of after something even back then. So how does Jesus is King change the way you look at the past year of Kanye?
Yeah, I mean, like, you're right, like those two records, it does sort of like seem like he's like searching for some sort of like relief or something. And like, I guess Jesus is King is sort of like saying that he's found that in religion, Christianity.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like paints how you can listen to those previous tracks.
I mean, I could just imagine him, right? Like he's after something back in Ye and Kids See Ghosts.
Yeah.
And then he's like kind of starts up this Sunday service thing and he's like, hey, this is like this is it. This is like the path to, I don't know, this kind of like freedom from the sunken place or whatever, is bothering him. Obviously obsessed with not being a slave, which he talks about like constantly lately. It's like, it's just interesting, right? That he was in retrospect after this the whole time, and this is what he landed on.
Right, but I mean, even similar to like the Wyoming project, I mean, I go back to Dark Fantasy again, like, are we going to look back at this as like this was just a period, like a Christian period, or is this, you know what I mean? Like, it seems so specific and so drilled down to this Christian thing that I find it really hard to believe that like this is just the way it's going to be from now on. And
that
the follow up to
sticks.
Jesus is King is going to be, Jesus is still king. You know what I mean?
Well, Jesus is born coming Christmas Day, apparently.
Yeah. I'll believe that when I see it.
Yeah, well, he said he wants to do a Sunday service album, and I think I kind of just wish this was a Sunday service album. I said that it feels to me like a bunch of Yandhi outtakes that a couple got the choir added to it in small ways, sometimes bigger ways. And in that respect, it kind of feels like he's in the middle of quite a radical transition, and he just shouldn't have even released like Jesus is King, because it's like he's still so in the middle of it, like I guess in a perfect world he would have released Yandhi and then had his conversion and ended up making a full-blown Christian album with a little bit deeper exploration, more integration of the Sunday service choir, because that's really what he's into, rather than repurposing some stuff he had lying around, adding a little bit of choir here and there. It feels like he's really radically changing, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get my hopes up, but it feels like if this album, Jesus is Born, comes out, it will be a more full expression of this new period that he's in. I'd be totally okay if it's like a live album where it's just like, or maybe even like a live in studio album where it is just, the Sunday service does stuff like Ultra Light Beam and they do stuff like Jesus Walks. And, it's just that, live thing of his back catalog in Sunday service form. That would be pretty cool. But that to me would feel like a fuller expression of where he's at mentally than Jesus is King.
Yeah, I think that's the only way I see Jesus is Born coming out on Christmas, is if it basically is a live album or a live in studio like Sunday service thing.
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, I hope I'm not wrong, but I 100% see this as it'll just be a period. Like he's sort of bad about this. Like you can each record for Kanye like is a distinct period. He dresses different.
Yeah.
He acts different. Like there's almost like a storyline for each record.
Right.
And so it's hard to not say, well, the next one's going to be something, like he's going to get into something.
And he
else.
likes to say stuff like, I will never release a CD again.
Oh yeah. I mean, remember Yeezus
I will edit Pablo forever,
Pablo will never be on anywhere but Tidal.
Yeah. Right. And so saying like, I am a gospel artist from here on out. He even said like, I'm changing my name to Ye. Like his stage name is going to be Ye. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so just saying like, I'm a gospel artist from here on out, that's hard to believe. Although, I mean, what will the reaction be if he, goes back to like, not being a Christian and in fact being like as vulgar as he is on Yandhi with his next album?
I think everybody will just be like, yeah, we knew that would happen. Like if this was a different artist, if it was Chance or something, people would be like, oh my God, he's back at it or something. But like with Kanye, you're like, yeah, I mean, everybody knew that was gonna happen. Is that
how you feel, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because I feel like it really makes him, I feel like it makes him look bad. You know what I mean? To try to come out and try to have everybody take him so seriously, and then just revert back to debauchery or whatever. I mean, I don't know. It's just not a great look, right?
And maybe he won't go back to full like debauchery. Maybe it'll be somewhere in the middle, which I think would be okay. I mean, he's 42 years old now. Like it's okay to like sort of like settle in that, like in the sort of.
You could do a Jay-Z's 444. It's like a very grown up.
Yeah, exactly. Or
album.
even,
and it was awesome.
Or even like the sort of like space Chance is in. Like Chance raps a lot about like Christian things, but he still cusses. And
true.
It's like a fine mix of like the secular and the like religious or whatever. So I could see like that. Maybe he won't go full bleached assholes and sweet and sour sauce lines,
right.
But it'll be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, he could pull that off, but I wouldn't be surprised if he makes a total about face. And for people who think that he's faking this, which I really don't.
No, I don't either. Yeah.
But people who think he's faking this, I mean, you couldn't invent a better PR ploy than like the announcement, Kanye's back,
Oh, yeah.
Kanye's back to swearing and, whatever, like that will be just huge news. And it's interesting because, Ye, it was a dud. I think it's pretty much seen as a dud. Now this is 2 duds in a row. If the next one is a dud, that's going to be a big problem. So how do you keep people excited? You keep changing. And if he did this, like, I'm back, people would be as excited as if he was following up dark fantasy,
Right.
So yeah, I wanted to ask, like, what effect will this album have on Kanye's legacy? It's like, it's hard to say if he doubles down on it and we get more disappointment. Already, doesn't it kind of feel like the excitement was there. Everybody had to check this album out because it's crazy that Kanye went Christian. But it's been 2 weeks and I don't see anybody talking about it. I personally feel a little bit sick of the album and over talking about it. You guys feel the same way?
Yeah. Exactly. I don't think I would still be listening to it as much if it wasn't like for this podcast. I probably would have given up on it after a couple days. And just online and stuff, like, I don't see like quite as much as, like, Pablo when that came out. I felt like everyone was talking about that for months and months and months.
Oh yeah, I agree. And I feel the same way. I'm already over this. In fact, during our period of listening to it, I was revisiting old Kanye just because I wanted to. And then, hearing Yandhi, when we finally got our hands on that, like, I was like, this is the Kanye that I want.
Yeah,
this is it. It was so relieving to hear it,
I listened to the Yandhi leaks quite a bit more than I listened to Jesus' King,
Same.
actually.
Same.
Yeah, so, the other thing I'm wondering is, like, let's say next year or even 2 years from now, doesn't it feel like, maybe I'm just kidding myself, but, like, I'm not going to put up with, and I don't think most people are going to put up with, another rollout like this that has become the typical Kanye rollout. Like, you got to be a truly dominant artist to fuck with people as much as Kanye does. Like, constant delays, just lying. It's like scrapping shit completely. I don't know. I think if he wants to remain at the center of the culture, like, he better drop another classic quick, or nobody's gonna have patience for him. And I'm not gonna, like, want to watch or listen to a 2-hour Zane Lowe interview for much longer.
No, I feel you. If we after two duds, the stands are gonna be there. Like, I'll still, whenever a new record gets announced, even if it's Jesus's Emperor, I'm gonna be excited for it. But, like, those, like, sort of fans that are on the border of being stans and are just, like, fans of Kanye, whatever. Like, you're gonna start losing those people, and those are, like, those are the ones you need. That's the majority of his fandom or whatever. You're gonna start losing those people, and people are gonna stop, like, after, like, dealing with, like, this, like, sort of, like, being jerked around, and then it being disappointment. Next time if you jerk people around, they'll be like, the last one wasn't that great. Yeah, I think people will still listen to it, especially like streaming makes it so easy to, like, just check it out. But I think it definitely will be, this next one's gotta, like, it's either gotta have, like, a normal, it's coming out, this date, and it comes out that date at midnight, thing, or it's gotta be, like, another masterpiece. Oh my God, he's back.
Yeah, or there's gotta be, like, listening parties that are going on and stuff where it's like, you're hearing clips and you're like, holy shit.
Something like Jesus, remember, like, with the projecting on the buildings and stuff, like something like that. Yeah, I could see.
I think a large portion of his fan base are made up of folks that are just, like, they're there for the music. You know what I mean? Like, they don't
a lot of people don't want to deal
Kanye's
with all
antics or whatever. They're not into any of that. They're there for the music.
Yeah.
Like, the people back in 2010 listening to Dark Fantasy who were hating on Kanye because of the whole Taylor Swift thing were converted just because the music was just that good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Those people are still there. I think, he should probably do something more along the lines of, like, a Beyonce type of move and just surprise everyone with
that would be amazing.
That would be,
like, just
oh my
drop
God.
it out of
Can
nowhere.
you imagine?
Yeah, be crazy.
Oh my God, I'm like aroused when you just said that. Okay, well, last question. Like, I'm wondering a little bit about what do you see the reception of this record be? I'm kind of curious about like the drop off that I expect from streaming numbers. Of course, like this album went like super number one. Everybody had to check it out, like you said, Dan. But I don't really see this sticking around. Although I can kind of imagine, because there's like some people really desperate to defend it. I can kind of imagine it being like this little contrarian, like, hey, it's actually really good, and getting a little cult following, maybe, even though I think that would be a little dishonest. But I think my real question is, like, based on the smile quality of the Yandhi leaks and everything, doesn't it feel like the legacy of Yandhi is going to be so much bigger than Jesus is King?
Yeah, I mean, because it'll always have that what if about it, like, because even if you don't particularly like love the leaks, you've always got that like, well, like maybe he would have fixed. You can always think like, oh, I don't like this part. Well, maybe that would have got fixed. Maybe that would have been there. Yeah. Maybe it would have been a perfect record kind of thing. But it's that what if is going to help Yandhi tremendously.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are going to just forget Jesus is King, and Yandhi's going to be, kind of the album that everyone's probably looks towards, you know what I mean? Or the real fans, I suppose, will always think of like Yandhi being the true release, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, I even think like I can imagine, let's say Jesus is Born doesn't come out, and it's not the live album I'm imagining. I can imagine like decade from now, we get the Rolling Thunder Review style box set of a bunch of live performances, and the legacy of that period in Kanye, I think, will be a lot more interesting than we got with Jesus is King. Anything else to say, or have we pretty much covered an entire year in the life of one of the craziest people that that anybody follows as religiously as we do?
Right. So let me ask you, because I mean, I know you guys obviously, you interact with plenty of people that obviously know of Kanye. Like, how are those sort of folks like reacting? So I have some people that I work with or whatever that, they obviously listen and stuff, but they are genuinely like, they don't really like Kanye's antics and stuff. And I'm over here like, man, he's the greatest artist of our generation. We all talking about whatever, But now I'm being fairly quiet about this whole Jesus is King thing. What kind of reactions are you guys sort of seeing?
No, that's a good question, because like at work, like everybody knows I'm like a huge Kanye fan and stuff, and like anytime he would do something stupid or whatever, like everybody's like, come get your boy,
type of you thing. Gonna spin this one, Dan?
No, exactly. And then even like Pablo came out, I was like, see, I'm right. He's great and stuff, and even a little bit with Ye, like some younger people that I work with and stuff were like, it's not the best, but it's good and stuff. I don't think anybody has even like talked to me about Jesus is King, like at work, like it's just sort of like outside, like nobody like really like cares that much. I have some like other friends that like Kanye that I've talked about, but they sort of are having the same like feelings as I am, that it's, it's lackluster at best kind of feelings.
Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting. And I was, pretty amazed when I have a friend who's like just obsessed with hip hop. And, I kind of asked him if he had listened to it yet. And he just kind of said like, no, in a way that was like, I haven't gotten around to it yet, and I might not ever. And it just like shook me, that the idea of a hip hop fan just not really being bothered to check out a new Kanye album. I was like, this is worrying.
The end times are coming.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're getting towards the end, but you know what what I worry is that, and we talked about this a little bit last podcast, but that we're reaching sort of the end. I mean, like I said, he's 42. Like David Bowie, just record after record, fantastic, and then we hit Let's Dance and everything, and then it's just basically lackluster garbage until Black Star. Bob Dylan did the same thing, like self-portrait,
Yeah,
and then
we might be there.
Slow Train Coming is like one of for both Bowie's biggest selling record at one point was Let's Dance, and at Dylan's biggest selling record at one point was Slow Train Coming. It's sort of like the last gasp or something of like this legendary artist, and I hope we're not there with Kanye, but I mean, he's been on the top for so long. It's difficult. It's difficult to like maintain that for so long. I mean, who has maintained it for much longer than he has,
Well, only like 30 years till we get his Black Star.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be great. Just don't die the next or 2 days later. All right. Well, what do you think? We'd love to read your thoughts on the air. You can email us popshieldpod@gmail.com. Next episode in 2 weeks. We're not sure exactly yet, but check Twitter, Facebook, all the social media stuff. I'm going to try to get better at saying what we're going to talk about before we talk about it. So if you like the show, help us out. Subscribe, leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Stay connected. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that junk. It's at Pop Shield Pod, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
So long.